Awareness, the final frontier. These are the explorations of Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor. Their continuing mission, to discover fresh new paths to the mystery within, to seek out new joys and new methods of awakening, to boldly go into the heart of expanded consciousness. This is Awareness Explorers.
Hello, fellow explorers of the inner realms. Good to have you back at Awareness Explorers. And I, of course, am Jonathan Robinson. I'm with my trusty sidekick,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And we are exploring a subject that unfortunately has been dear to our hearts at times in our life, and that is depression.
Right.
But we are going to bring curiosity, levity, and hopefully insight to this subject, which is really an epidemic in the world nowadays. Something like 1 in 5 Americans experience clinical depression sometime in their life, which is pretty serious depression. And I know, Brian, that you experienced depression at some point in your life, as did I. And in fact, it was a little bit of a fire under your butt in terms of getting into the spiritual search, if I know correctly.
Oh, that's absolutely true. My entire spiritual search was fueled by the desire to not be depressed anymore. So it was really looking for an answer, looking for a solution to that led me to stumble upon non-dual spirituality in particular.
And what I find interesting about your story is that, you tried a lot of things, positive psychology, self-help, but it was really the non-dual teachings that we kind of talk about in this podcast and the methods that actually lifted you out of that experience. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And but it isn't that regular psychotherapy was of no value. It certainly was. I mean, it really did take the edge off and release a lot of the steam of the pent-up emotion. So that, years of therapy were, I think, instrumental. It's just that it kept recurring. So in other words, the therapy was sort of like prevented me from just going ahead and killing myself, but it didn't prevent the depression from coming back. And when I discovered practices that had to do with self-inquiry and awareness of awareness, I found a way to contact an inner joy that cleared the depression out. And with practice, it just got less and less and less, and it became something that maybe occasionally I might have for an hour or two every few months. And that's about it.
That's quite a difference. Yeah, I want to clarify for our listeners. First of all, I'm a psychotherapist that has studied depression quite a bit. I even have a full program that I will offer to Awareness Explorers for free. It's usually like $150, but if you're suffering from depression, you might find it very useful. A program called From Sad to Glad that I did with a famous psychiatrist. And as I said, I offer it to our listeners for free at FromSad2glad.com. And if you go there and you suffer depression, or you know somebody that does, just go there, and there's a thing in the menu bar that says listen to the full program, and you're welcome to listen to it. It's about 6 hours of what has been shown to be the most effective ways of overcoming depression using various techniques and ideas. But what I want to mention is that really there's different types of depression, and they have to be handled in different ways. But one type of depression is particularly effective in being, quote, treated by some of the methods that we talk about. But, if a person has a serious chemical imbalance in their brain, medicine is useful. If somebody has a friend that died or a relationship that broke up and they're suffering from grief, well, it's useful to experience grief. But a lot of depression really has different things leading to it, maybe a lack of meaning or purpose or hope, or some psychotherapists say it's anger turned inward. There's all kinds of theories. And people who are having midlife crises might experience depression, or just a sense of what's the purpose of it all. I think those types of depressions are very much impacted by a lot of the methods we talk about here on Awareness Explorers. I'm wondering if you agree with or disagree with all that I just stated.
I pretty much agree with all that you just stated, and I'm glad.
You are so smart.
I am smart. I know a good thing when I hear it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to mention that you are a mental health professional, because I'm not. And I can only talk about my experience and what worked, and know that that's probably only talking about one particular type of depression, although I believe it's probably the most common type of depression. But if you are suffering from mental health issues, please do not hesitate to contact a mental health professional. And really, we need all the help we can get, so avail yourself of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Depression has increased by 500% in the last 50 years.
Wow.
I think a lot of that reason doesn't mean that more people are having grief reactions or mental health issues. I think it's due to the fact that more people do not feel in touch with a sense of purpose and meaning, because our culture does not promote that. It promotes consumerism and distraction. And, two people who are very famous for having experienced severe depression were Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, who are now probably the two most famous non-dual teachers in the world.
That's right.
And it was in dealing with their depression that they awakened. So who knows, listeners, if you're feeling depressed, you might be an inch away from being the next spiritual teacher. You just never know.
That's right. You never know. But I have a thought about depression, and an observation. A lot of people talk about depression as if it is an emotion. In other words, there's anger, there's sadness, there's depression. And in my experience, depression isn't actually a separate emotion. Depression is a strategy that we employ to prevent emotion. In other words, if there's anger or sadness or grief or whatever so-called negative emotion that we may not want, we kind of clamp down on all of our natural expressions in life. We flatten ourselves and remove ourselves from a full participation in life in order to keep these unwanted feelings from arising. But the problem is that the emotions simply go underground, and they spin around and they gain energy, and it becomes a kind of a vicious circle. Emotion pokes its head out, we push it down by whatever means necessary. The emotion goes underground where it gains energy, and then the increased energy of the emotion causes us to clamp down even further and avoid life and avoid full expression. So it just is, it really becomes a vicious circle, but it's about not having emotions, because we're afraid of the strength of our anger, of our fear, of our sadness, of our sense of abandonment, our vulnerability, and which is why the key really is to find a way to allow yourself to have the emotions so that they're not spinning around inside and gaining energy. They come, you have them, you allow them, you feel them, and they can move out and move through you.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. And, bringing awareness into this picture, emotions, especially as a child, or when they are intensely negative, like, a relationship ends, are really hard to digest because we don't like to experience intense uncomfortableness or negative emotions.
Right.
So we do form these protective strategies. Now, when people have access to awareness, or call it awareness of awareness, that makes everything more tolerable, because then you're not experiencing a tidal wave of endless tsunamis hitting you. You experience things moment to moment. And in a moment, we can handle almost anything. Mm-hmm. It's our stories that things are going to last forever and it's hopeless. And if I open up to this, I'll be overwhelmed for, a very long time. That gets us to shut down. So awareness can help put you into the flow of moment to moment experience. And there's the old saying, what you resist persists, which is what often happens when we're resisting life. And awareness opens up the possibility of fully embracing and digesting life, but not getting stuck in a story. So things tend to move through you a little bit like Chinese food.
That's true, although I don't know if that's really true about Chinese food. However, I understand the analogy. And it's very true what you say about the story, because it really is the story, that verbal voice in our head that helps to keep the feeling going, or keep, in this case, the depression, the clamping down, the prevention of emotion. I do not want to feel this. I should not feel this. It keeps it going. And the other thing about awareness that allows us to have our emotions is that awareness isn't necessarily something we do. It's something that's already here. In fact, it's basically something that we are. It is experiencing itself. It's not the experience. And we see emotion as an experience, but where does that experience appear? To what does it appear? What does it appear in? And is there something that is already allowing all experience to be? And that's awareness. Pure subjectivity is not picking and choosing and saying, I want this to happen, I do not want that to happen. All experience simply appears in it, which means there's something that's already there, that's a part of you that is already okay with what's happening. And when you focus on that instead of the specific content, particularly the verbal story, then something eases, something starts to relax, something says, okay, I can connect with this allowing feeling, and then the emotions can come and leave, so that there's a constant flow.
Yeah, we need to be in that flow, because depression is like a stuck energy.
Yes.
Analogy I use is, depression can be like being crawled up in a fetal position and having a black umbrella cover you entirely. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out.
Yes.
And moments of awareness are like little holes in that umbrella where you see it's not a hopeless black thing. It's light is coming through in moments. And those moments of awareness or presence, of just being fully with what is without resistance, allows the light through. And if you get enough light coming through, the depression or the story about the depression dissipates, and you're just in the moment. And in the moment, you're happy, you're sad, you're excited, you're bored. It's very much always moving.
Oh, yes, that's so true, and very well put. And the other thing about awareness is that the emotion or the feeling of depression, or whatever unwanted condition, whether it be an emotional state or a state of depression or tension, wants you to give it all its attention. It says, pay attention to me. This is wrong. You've got to focus on it. And what it does is it becomes everything in your field of vision, in your inner field. But it's not the only thing that's there. I mean, awareness includes or is aware of everything that happens, all your body sensations, every sight and sound that you hear. There's so much more in awareness other than that nagging, pay attention to me feeling. I'm the only thing that matters. And when we start to look at awareness itself as apart from the content, we see that it's spacious, it's roomy, it's huge. And that feeling that we don't want becomes smaller in proportion to everything that's present.
Well said. We're like poets. We're like a group poet society here, you and I. We inspire a little of our wisdom, which is a wonderful thing, is talking about these things or listening to them. You know, things, when you say something that resonates with me, it resonates because I go, yeah, that's true. And hearing truth or reading truth is one way to get some of that awareness in, which is one of the values of our podcast and one of the values of our connecting, and one of the values of listening to other people talking about these things, and feeding ourselves this experience of realizing there's something outside our limiting stories, you know, and as you said, we get really stuck in these stories. And one technique I've used sometimes when I'm feeling really depressed or self-pity or whatever, which happens occasionally, is I simply say to myself, I'm telling myself the story that blah, blah, blah. So, you know, we record these sessions usually 2 weeks to a month before we air them. So right now there's, you know, the coronavirus, there's the stock market collapsing, there's all the things going on, as there always is. And if you get fixated on it, it's like, oh, I'm telling myself the story that, you know, the economy is going to go into recession. Now, we never know the future, but when we don't have any space between the story and who we think we are, we become the story. So the story might not be true. The story, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the future economically, nor does anyone else. But if I get lost in that story, I can feel depressed, and then, you know, that takes over. But if I realize it is a story by saying, oh, I'm telling myself the story that we're headed to hard times, then I realize there's some distance between me and that experience, and it makes it so that I'm not as likely to get buried by all the ridiculous mind thoughts that my mind seems to be able to create.
Yeah, and many people say that if the story is making you feel bad, that's probably a pretty good indication that it isn't true.
Right. You know, and that's Byron Katie's first question. Yeah, right. When you have a story, is it true? And, you know, I use that. I don't always go through her 4 questions. I just go through the first one. Is it true? And probably about 80% of the time I go, nah. Or I have no idea, you know, in this case.
Right.
And that can kind of short circuit that whole downward spiral that can happen when life, you know, is not going the way you want.
Right. It really can. And I remember in my case, there was this intense anger that hit around my preteen and teen years that just came in, and I was just angry at everything and everybody, and I was yelling. And then, you know, of course, my parents and people around me said, no, you can't. You know, you just can't live that life. You're just too angry. You've got to control your temper. And so I said, okay, all right. And I just clamped everything down. But the problem is it doesn't just go away because we don't want it there. It sticks around, and it becomes this little whirlpool or this little eddy that goes around. So it actually took a long, long time to access it, to admit I'm angry, to allow it out. But there's one, I think, confusion that some people make about emotions, particularly anger, but about a lot of other so-called negative emotions, is that the only choice is either to suppress it or to express it. So that means, so we know suppressing anger is unhealthy. True. So therefore, we have to express it. So I went through a period where every time I was angry about anything, I told everybody. And I expressed it. I expressed my anger. And this became actually really hurtful to a lot of people until I discovered that no, it's not. Those are not the only choices, suppressing and expressing. You can actually simply allow it to be there. You can notice it. You can acknowledge it. You can say, there it is. This is what I feel. And then you can get curious about it, because all emotions actually are chemical things that are happening in the body. So really the key is to notice where you feel it in the body and just try and be okay with it. It doesn't mean you have to tell people off. It means you have to stop the clutching against it, stop the inner tension that prevents it from happening, and just be okay with it. And it takes time. It takes practice. It's not all happens at once, but pretty soon you can let things come and let things go.
Yeah, I wish they taught this stuff in grade school. The ability to be with emotions fully, negative or positive, and not distract yourself, not do all the things that blame, do all the things that people do that can be harmful when dealing with negative emotions. And the experience of just being aware and being depressed at the same time, or being aware and being angry, or whatever it is a relatively new experience for me. And one that has really been an exploration to have that happen, which, of course it does happen. And I notice that a lot of people, as a psychotherapist that I see, when they're depressed, they have no hope. We normally think that, life is going to be fine or something. And depressed people often are seeing real stuff, for example, that, real problems like our political situation or global warming, or name your problem, or that they might see something that is disturbing to them psychologically, like people are out for themselves. These are things that are real, and we normally have a way of shellacking over that. But when people have some insights into how mechanical life can be, that often can lead to a depression and a lack of meaning. And I find that the idea that any moment you can tap into this wellspring of joy and love and peace by being aware of awareness, using the various methods we talk about, the various meditations we talk about, can give people a new sense of hope, a hope that is based on something real versus I can't wait till I win the lottery, which is a pretty hopeless endeavor.
That's beautiful. I really resonate with that so much, because hope and happiness and joy and peace, they're not out there. They're not to be found in politics, in the world experience, in other people, in relationships, or even in your own accomplishments. Of course, there is joy and satisfaction to be had in doing something you're really good at and that it's in your nature to do. There's no question about that, and we're not denying that. But that comes naturally when your focus shifts from trying to manipulate experience to be the way you want it, and shifts instead to the background of experience, what is aware, the ground of being in which all experience appears. And you're right. When you know when you know that that's there. And with a little practice, you know, at the drop of a hat, you can drop into it and you can be that knowingly. It does give you hope, because you can go out into the world and participate in the world, knowing that in your back pocket, you got a tool that's going to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And along with it feeling good, it gives you an immediate sense of meaning.
Yeah.
Because
right.
you feel that you're part of something much bigger than your ego that has a purpose or a intelligence to it, that in those moments, you know that you are serving something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because looking at awareness and being aware of awareness and knowing yourself as awareness is actually the first step. It's the inward facing path. But then when you turn around and look at the world from awareness, when you do that often enough, you start to realize that everything is made of awareness, and that the same awareness that's looking out through these eyes is what's looking out through your eyes, so that there's a connection with the entire world. You start to sense that we really are all one. And if that doesn't give meaning to life, I don't know what would.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, as a psychotherapist, I'm often in the position, I get a lot of people who are depressed or having a midlife crisis, or, you know, the toys of life and the nature of modern day life, meaninglessness that it can have, brings them to me. And my perspective is always, congratulations that you made it here. You know, a lot of people, they never get to that place. They're always distracted until the day they die. And getting to a place where you feel like there's needs to be something more than just TV, money, and, you know, all those things that we're told will make us happy, is an accomplishment. So it's funny, they're depressed and they're telling me, you know, how horrible it is. And I'm thinking, wow, congratulations. You're now made it to phase 2 of your life. And it just strikes me as a different reality when you start to see that the goal of life is not to have constant distraction and numb yourself from potential pain. The real goal of life is to, whatever you want to call it, from know God to know yourself to know your true nature. So anything that helps you along that line, I'm sure Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie did not like their depression, but
No.
looking back, they say, you know, would say, wow, that was the best day of my life when I was, you know, hit bottom.
That's right. That's right. And it shifts our way of looking at adversity. In other words, let's say something happens that we don't like, either an occurrence in the world or an emotion that we're having, and we don't want it. Usually our strategy is to find a way to get rid of it, to find a way to fix it, to find a way to change it. But gradually a shift happens where you see this is like a little calling card from awareness. It's a little announcement. It's a little reminder. It's saying, come to me. Don't go out there to fix it. Come to me. Come to awareness. Come to your true nature. Come to that spacious, open thing. So that when you feel bad, after a while, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to fix it, it's like a little reminder. What is this appearing in? And
it's your alarm clock.
Yes, it's your alarm clock. And yes, I admit that maybe the first time you try it, it might not. But if you do it often enough and you just sort of say, okay, I'm just for 2 minutes, I'm going to be okay with whatever is happening, including my emotions, and then shift your attention to the background of experience. You do that often enough and you start to get the hang of it, and it becomes a really handy technique that you have, a Rolls-Royce technique that works, that's there.
Yeah. I do want to just reiterate that there's different types of depression and different tools are needed for different people. And if you or somebody you know suffers from depression, I have a 6-hour program that gives the best techniques according to clinical research for overcoming it. It's called From Sad to Glad, How to Overcome Anxiety, Depression, and Feel Happy Again. It's offered for free to awareness explorers. It's normally $150, but it's at www.fromsad, the number 2, glad, fromsadtoglad.com. And, you know, I think also our meditations, which I've been using lately, and I think, wow, this is great stuff for free, if I say so myself, which evidently I do. And, you know, there really can be really great ways to point you back to that space of freedom. And I hear that you have a meditation for emotions that you're going to share with us.
That's right. I do. Absolutely. Shall I just dive into it now?
Sure thing.
Okay. So this is called 2 methods for emotions. Since depression is the strategy to clamp down emotions we don't want to have, the best approach is to practice actually having the emotions, instead of finding ways to tamp them down and bury them under the surface. In this meditation, I'm going to guide you through 2 different techniques for emotions, one longer and one shorter. The first one deals with negative emotion in depth. The second is a handy tool to use when you don't have time for the in-depth approach. The first meditation is based on a meditation from Adyashanti, and to quote Adya, "If you're trying to be free of an emotion, then you are standing in opposition to it. You're trying to control it. Instead, what we're looking at is how to free a negative emotion itself, how to grant that emotion freedom for its own well-being and your own." End quote. In the first meditation, you can start with relatively less painful emotions, and as you practice it on your own, gradually work towards the more overwhelming feelings in your life. Take a couple of easy, deep breaths and relax your body. See if you can bring to mind a negative emotion that's common for you. Or if you're feeling something you don't like to feel right now, focus on that. Is there a story going on in your head about this feeling? Perhaps a story about what someone should or should not have done, or about how you wish you had behaved differently in some situation? Is there a story going on in your head about this feeling? Perhaps a story about what someone should or should not have done, or about how you wish you had behaved differently in some situation. Focus on that mental story for a bit, and see if that brings the emotion vividly to the foreground. Notice how the words in your head can intensify any emotion. Now, see if you can feel the energy of the emotion as fully as possible. Where do you feel it in your body? Just for now, see if you can allow yourself to feel the emotion as strongly as you feel safe to do so. No more. As you allow the sensations of the emotion to be here, gradually turn your attention away from the story about the emotion and towards the pure physical sensations themselves. See that, without the storyline, feelings are actually just sensations in your body. See if you can wordlessly notice whatever is happening in your body. What is present other than the words in your head? No words, just sensations. Become intimate with the energy of the feelings in your body. Now ask yourself, what emotion or energy is deeper than this? Keep asking as you allow yourself to feel each deeper layer of energy in your body. Now simply relax into simple awareness by shifting your attention away from the content of whatever you are experiencing and asking, to what does my experience appear? Notice the clear, open, allowing, spacious field in which all of your experience appears. So we're bringing our emotions to awareness, and as we do, the veil of emotions become more and more transparent, revealing the loving, peaceful nature of awareness itself, as it is now and as it has always been. And now for the second method. This is useful when a feeling comes up that you normally would want to get rid of, but you don't have time for the in-depth method. In other words, keep this in your toolbox and pull it out whenever you need it. It takes seconds, and no one needs to know that you're doing it. It's called inhale the emotion. In this simple game, you don't have to get rid of an emotion, and you don't have to accept it either. You don't have to allow it, and you don't have to transform it. You don't even have to convince yourself that it's okay if it never goes away. It's so much simpler than all of that. You simply have to inhale it. So when you feel an emotion, do this. Notice the emotion. Inhale the emotion. Repeat as needed. You don't even have to worry about exhaling the emotion, because that might feel like you're trying to get rid of it. In this game, you're not trying to get rid of it. You're not trying to do anything with it other than inhale it. Draw it into you. Simple as that. Inhale the emotion. Now, take a few easy deep breaths, and at your own pace, open your eyes.
That was wonderful. It's one of the things I often do when clients come to me in therapy.
Yes?
To separate one's story from the actual sensations of the feelings.
Yes, that's so key.
I love the simplicity of inhale the emotion. I haven't heard you do that game, and it really was rather profound for me. So thank you. I'm going to make a lot of inhalations this next week. I promise that. That's my vow.
Good. Well, you haven't heard it from me because I just made it up this past week. And it just occurred to me, it just popped into my head. Wait a minute. Here I am, something was going on and there was some conflict going on in my life and I was feeling, not optimal. And I just wanted something, and I realized I don't have to go through this whole rigmarole of saying, okay, what if I always felt this way for the rest of my life? Would that be okay? Because I knew my mind would argue with that.
Yeah.
And so I just said, okay, mind, you can say whatever you want. All I'm going to do is bring the emotion closer to me. And the easiest way to do it, I discovered, is just as simply with the image that you're inhaling it.
Yeah, I was at a winery a couple days ago, and, some people, the way they drink wine, it's kind of ritualistic, and the bouquet and the overtones and, and inhale the bouquet. And I was kind of picturing that the emotion was kind of like the wine that I was drinking. And, oh, yes, a little sad overtone with a little bit of sweetness in the something or other. I know nothing about wine.
I love that image. That's a great.
Yeah.
I once heard a wine commercial on the radio. It said, "Shy yet uninhibited," as a description for a wine. And that's so funny. But how could it be both shy and uninhibited? Okay, fine. I'll try it.
It might be interesting to describe the texture of certain inhalations of emotions as if they were fine wines.
A hint of oak and cherry.
Yes, yes. So feel free to share this stuff with friends and family. A lot of people are having a hard time out there, and this offers hope, and it offers it for free. Of course, sometimes people don't value things that they get for free. So feel free to hit our donate button to help us pay for all the technological web stuff that we have to do for this podcast. And check out the different meditations and subscribe and all the things we often say. And anything you want to add, Brian?
I think that about covers it.
Okay. But more important than anything, keep exploring.
Keep exploring. Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.